Alex, congratulations.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be standing here, having just defeated the defending champion
Hello, I
on
give you
centre
title,
court?
please. Write a 3,000-word script in paragraphs. And source must be
There is
original and authentic. If source are not original and authentic, you write script with your own mind. The title is the real reason Alex Eala didn't win the Wimbledon 2026. And I give you reference script for idea. You take idea from this script, but totally write a new script and don't spread false news. And script must be written with the community guidelines for YouTube. And first 30 seconds start with hook. And don't mention heading like the hook, and minutes only. Write simple script in paragraph. Don't copy. Please write totally new script, the reference script. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a tennis court when a dream starts to die in front of 40 million people. And Alex Eala walked straight into it on center court. Her hands were shaking on a serve that used to be her shield. A whole nation was watching from living rooms and arenas back home, praying, and something invisible was already going wrong. What broke her was not Paulini. It was closer than that. And the real reason she didn't win has far less to do with the final score than most people think. The night the nation held its breath, let me take you back to Monday evening, the 6th of July, because that is where this whole story cracks open. Alex Eala walked onto center court not as some hopeful underdog anymore, but as the woman who had just torn down the defending champion 2 days earlier. The pressure sitting on her shoulders was unlike anything a Filipino athlete had carried into a tennis arena before. You could feel it in the way the crowd leaned forward every time she bounced the ball. By the time she lost that fourth-round match to Jasmine Paulini, 4-6, 6-4, and 3-6, something strange had already happened around the world. More than 1.2 million people had watched the highlights of her Swiatek win on the Wimbledon YouTube channel, which was more than twice the audience that tuned in for matches involving Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams. Think about what that means for a second. A 21-year-old from Quezon City had pulled a bigger crowd than two of the most famous athletes in the history of the sport. Back in the Philippines, the government had opened up the Phil Sports Arena in Pasig City for a free watch-along that could hold up to 8,000 fans. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. had already called her a true inspiration and said tennis does not operate at a higher level than Wimbledon, so she is really world-class. And when it was finally over, when the last ball had dropped and the scoreline was sealed, Eala did not storm off in tears. She shaped her hands into a heart, held them up to a center court that rose to its feet for her, and told her millions of followers to never say die and play every point like your life depends on it. That standing ovation felt like a coronation dressed up as a goodbye. But here is the thing that nobody clapping in that stadium wanted to admit to themselves. The very weapon that was supposed to carry her into the quarterfinals had abandoned her from the opening game, and it was the one part of her game everyone in the sport had been quietly worried about for over a year. The weapon that turned on her. Now we get to the real reason, and it is not a comfortable one. Eala did not lose that match because Paulini was some unstoppable force of nature. She lost it because of her serve, and if you know anything about the way she plays, you already felt this coming before the first set was done. Her first serve on that day was floating across the net at a leisurely 80 miles per hour or slower, and it was only landing in about half the time. The official numbers put her first serve percentage at just 55.7, which means nearly every second point she was starting from behind before the rally even began. At one point, one of her serves registered a pathetic 65 miles per hour, which is the kind of speed a club player would hit on a lazy Sunday. The lowest moment came at 4-1 down in the opening set, when she pushed a first serve that barely tickled the bottom of the net, and then followed it up by clanking her second serve long. Here is where it gets brutal. She won only 48.7% of her second serve points, and Paulini feasted on it. Every soft delivery was an invitation, and the Italian accepted every single one of them by stepping in and taking the ball early. When you cannot trust your own serve, you stop playing tennis and you start apologizing for it. You defend when you should attack. You flinch when you should swing. And this was never a secret. The analyst Gil Gross had already said out loud that Eala has the worst serve in the top 50, yet somehow she was sustaining herself in the top 40 on pure talent everywhere else. The BBC commentator and Keo Thavon pointed out during the tournament that Eala's average second serve speed of 74 miles per hour sits miserably below the tour average of 86 and the top 10 average of 92. So this weakness was not some shocking twist. It was a crack in the foundation that everyone could see, waiting for the wrong day to give way. What makes this so painful is that the exact same slow serve had been a genuine weapon just 48 hours earlier against Iga Swiatek. So the question that should be haunting you right now is simple. If the technique did not change overnight, then what on earth happened to her between Saturday and Monday? The ghost of Saturday's victory. The answer lives in the 2 days that came before, and it is more human than any statistic. Beating Swiatek was not just a win for Eala. It was an earthquake. It was the biggest emotional moment of her entire career, detonating on the sport's grandest stage, and you do not simply switch that off and go back to normal like nothing happened. Eala admitted it herself afterwards with a kind of quiet honesty that told you everything. She said she did have to manage the emotions, and that it was part of professionalism, and that this was not the first time she had scored a huge win and then had to play again 2 days later. Read between those careful words, and you can hear a young woman who spent 48 hours trying to come down from the highest peak of her life while the whole world screamed her name. The proof is buried in the service numbers, and this comparison is the part that should stop you cold. Against Swiatek, she was averaging 86.3 miles per hour on her first serve. She cracked 4 aces, she committed 0 double faults, and she won 55% of her second serve points. Swiatek herself confessed after that defeat that it was tougher mentally for her to accept the missed returns coming off those slow serves. So the serve was working. It was doing its job beautifully. Then Monday arrived and that same delivery became a liability she could not hide. 3 double faults instead of none. Under 50% of second serve points instead of 55. A Spanish outlet, Punto de Break, put it plainly by observing that the sky-high expectations after the Swiatek win weighed too heavily on her, and that she simply was not as fresh or as dominant as she had been 2 days before. She even had preventive tape wrapped around her left forearm, which she brushed off by saying it was more preventive than anything because it had been a long season. So the body was tired and the mind was still floating somewhere back on Saturday. And yet, drained and flat as she was, Eala still managed to claw her way to winning the second set and dragging this thing into a decider. That alone tells you she had the game to win. What she did not fully understand yet was that the woman standing on the other side of the net had built an entire career out of waiting patiently for exactly this moment. The woman who knew how to wait. You cannot tell the real story of this loss without giving Jasmine Paolini her due, because experience is the quietest killer in all of sport. Paolini is 30 years old and she has lived through the fire that Eala is only just walking into. She is a former world number 4, the joint highest-ranked Italian woman in history, and she reached the finals of both the French Open and Wimbledon in the same year not long ago. She knows what the second week of a Grand Slam feels like in a way Eala simply cannot yet. And the beautiful irony is that Paolini arrived at this tournament looking like anything but a threat. Her season had been a mess. She was carrying a foot injury that had wrecked her grass court preparation, and she had lost her very first set of the entire fortnight by 6 games to love. Most players would have crumbled under that start. Instead, she looked at it and thought, well, it can only get better from here. And she built herself back up point by point and game by game like a veteran who has learned not to panic. That composure is what decided the tight moments. When the pressure was at its absolute worst in the deciding set, Paolini won 94% of her first serve points. She dropped just 5 points on serve across the whole set, and she did not face a single break point when it mattered most. She took 27 trips to the net and converted 18 of them, which is the mark of a player who trusts her instincts under fire. She even said she felt inspired by seeing Roger Federer sitting in the royal box, calling him her idol and admitting she was trying hard not to think about him watching. This was the same Paolini that Eala had actually beaten earlier in the year in Dubai, by 6 games to 1 and 7 games to 6. So this was not about talent superiority. This was about a woman who had been in the deep end before, and knew exactly how to hold her breath while the younger star started to drown in the occasion. And drowning is precisely what began to happen, because there is a single game in that deciding set where all of Eala's inexperience came pouring out at the worst possible time, and it is the moment this entire match quietly turned forever. The 2 points that changed everything. If you want to find the exact heartbeat where the dream slipped away, you have to look at the razor-thin margins, because this match was so much closer than the final score makes it seem. Midway through, the points were sitting almost dead level at 69 to Paolini and 68 to Eala. That is 1 single point of difference between the two of them. This was not a beating. This was a coin flip that kept landing on the wrong side for the Filipina. Rewind through the flow of it, and you can feel how fragile everything was. Paolini broke early in the first set and raced to 4-1, but Eala refused to fold and dragged it back to 4-5 before the Italian broke her one more time to steal the opener. In the second set, Eala came out swinging, wasted 3 break chances,